My name is Silvia Filippini Fantoni, and I'm a manager of evaluation and technology-based engagement at the Indianapolis Museum of Art. And I'm chairing this wonderful session today. I know this is a kind of a hard session. It's kind of, we're almost at the end. You've all drank a lot of wine, listened to a lot of people in the past few days, eaten a lot of finger food. But if you bear with me with us for the next 90 minutes, I'm sure that you will have a great experience, okay? Before I introduce the presenters today's session, I just wanted to give you a little bit of hard facts about sort of why it is important, why technology is key in engaging teenagers and children, which is the topic of today's presentation. Here are some numbers that have been recently published in a series of studies, and obviously they relate to the United States of America, so I'm sorry if there's some foreigners here. But if we look at the ages 0 to 8, the study from the Common Sense Media report said that 52% of American children now have access to mobile devices at home, 41% have a smartphone, 21% iPod, and 8% iPad or similar tablet. More than a quarter of parents have downloaded apps for their children to use. And then if we look at the children that have used mobile devices, 10% between the age of 0 to 1, 39% between the age of 2 and 4, and 52% between the age of 5 and 8. So lots of technology usage, particularly mobile devices. Similar stories for teenagers. So we have 70% of teenagers own a cell phone today, 77% own a game console, 74% own an iPod or an MP3 player, 60% own a desktop or laptop computer, and then 55% own a portable gaming device. So what do they do with all these devices and technology? Apparently, they are involved in electronic media for 7.5 hours a day, which, given that they're multitasking, that is equivalent to 10 hours and 45 minutes on average per day connected to technology and interacting with new media. Obviously, we can have a complete new panel about whether this is a good or a bad thing, looking whether it impacts somehow their, attention and other problems that they have. But I think that the most important thing that we can kind of take from this is that if we want to engage children and teenagers, technology is really a fundamental tool. Okay? Now we're going to see how this has been done by our presenters today. The first presenter is coming all the way from London. Her name is Lucinda Blaser, and she's digital project manager at the Royal Museum in Greenwich, where she deals mostly with mobile and crowdsourcing experiences. Okay, here she is.
Thank you. You didn't sit in the right one. So just to give you a bit of context to Royal Museums Greenwich, it comprises of about 4 museums, the National Maritime Museum, the Royal Observatory Greenwich, the Queen's House and the Cutty Sark. And today I've got my Maritime Museum hat on, so I've put my best sailor chic top on, some nice naval stripes going on. I don't know what I'd wear for the Royal Observatory, maybe something a bit more sciencey and spacey. Right, so just to give you an overview of this project. It was a collaboration between our learning department and a digital media team. I know it's a bit weird to say it was state that up front, but I think it's really important to say that we were working together right from the beginning, holding each other's hands the whole way through. A lot of times museums are kind of isolated in their departments. The digital media team will do one thing with tablets, the learning team may do another thing with tablets, and then you end up with 2 sets of tablets doing a similar task. So this was very much a collaborative process the whole way through, and it's kind of set the standard for the museum from now on in terms of digital projects. Our Discover sessions are structured school activities. So that's very important to know that we're giving the devices, the tablets, to the school kids when they come to the museum as part of a study day. This experience is aimed at kind of 12-year-olds to 15-year-olds. So it's a big range of students that are coming to the museum to have an experience on gallery with us. And the aim of these study days is to allow kids to improve their historical inquiry skills using the museum's collections. It's about getting them out of the classroom, looking at the object, looking at these primary sources. And we're linking to the history and citizenship curriculum, so the different aspects and how we can engage and question these objects and use them for our own tools. So to give you a bit of background about mobile learning at the museum is we kind of started in 2009 using a third-party system called UCL. I don't know if you've heard of it. And we gave students some lovely, lovely old Nokia 3330s, I think they were. I think I had one when I was about 16, so all the kids were like, what the heck is that? But just from having that kind of basic technology, giving that to them, really got them engaged. And what they would do is they kind of go around gallery and look for these codes that you can see up in the corner on some, not all, object labels. So it was really much a hide and seek with terms of these codes, and it was just a nightmare. So we'd give them a bit of kind of a tweet length bit of information about that object that they found the code for. They'd be able to photograph that object, collect it, record themselves, video, audio, that sort of thing. Just use the capabilities of the phone itself, essentially. The whole point of doing this was the fact that our galleries aren't developed for school groups. They're all for the older audiences, the more adult audience, the researcher audience. So a lot of the context of the gallery isn't really for that age group. It's not suited to our learning needs. So the galleries may be of that big, wider context. So our Atlantic gallery talks about the Atlantic trade between America and Europe. And our learning team really want to focus in on that transatlantic slavery topic, which is really big and important to teach the kids about. So that was a very small section of the gallery. So we really needed this extra layer of information that would help the students focus on that kind of topic. So we started using UCL, and after a couple of years, the third-party system changed the way they did things. They became more commercialised, which really didn't fit in with the museum's wants or needs and how we wanted to use the technology. So we started looking around for other third-party systems, what other museums such as yourselves were all doing, stalking you a little bit, never mind. But we couldn't find anything that we really, really fell in love with or did exactly what we wanted to. So we decided to have a go at building something ourselves, hopefully with great success. Okay, so just evaluating that third-party system, we found that students enjoy controlling their own learning process. They're much more engaged on gallery, they become focused, and they collaborate with each other. And that's really important, getting students to learn from one another rather than us talking to them. They're talking to each other and learning from each other. So the process was a very much user-focused development process. We really built evaluation into this project right from the start, asking students, what do you want? If there is magic in the world, what would you want to do in this gallery? Let's ignore technology. You can do anything, we don't mind. What do you want to go and do in this space? And the answer was, wait for it, a quiz. Ooh. So we asked them, okay, you want to do a quiz? Brilliant. Do you enjoy doing quizzes? Not really. Forget what you're used to doing in museums. Forget what you expect to do. You can do anything, and we will try and make that happen. So that was really important to get the kids thinking about and building their own resources in terms of what they want to do in this space. So what we came up with was to develop something that kind of allowed them to make their own routes through, to question objects and to make links between objects that they find interesting, not what the museum or the teacher wants to make them look at, to make them think is interesting. So hopefully we've managed to achieve that. So we found kids are becoming much more engaged and having their own independent learning experiences. So what we did is we started building a set of tools. We initially started with one gallery, and then halfway through the project developed it into 2 galleries. So that kind of tested our thinking. Is what we're doing actually flexible? can we do more with it than just this one targeted project? Because it has to be scalable to include the museum's future needs. Otherwise, what's the point of spending all this money building something that's going to last a few years, and then the whole staff and ideas of the museums change, and we have to do something again from scratch. So building a set of tools that can be fitted together in different combinations, making it flexible and unique to each gallery, but saying it's still using those core components was really important. We also built it on top of systems that we use elsewhere in the museum for our gallery interactives, and that's called the Collections Information Integration Middleware, or the SIM. And that's kind of an augmented layer that sits on top of our collection system and pulls all that data out of our database, our MIMSI database, and augments it with that focused information that's for the school kids. So I don't have to remember the passwords to multiple CMSs, which can be located in multiple places around the museum, because I'm terrible with passwords, and it's not so good. So using these tools that we have already really makes it sustainable for the museum's needs. So what are they up to? So we get them to make their own paths, follow their own interests, investigate objects on gallery that they find interesting, not limit them to what they want to find out. We're not asking them to find the right answer even, just to take a look at the object, make their own links, and gather evidence and decisions. We built 2 activities into the study day, which take up 45 minutes. So there's kind of 3 things that they do within the whole study day in different ways. So this digital layer is just one part of those 3 activities. They do the same thing again and again and again, but in a different way to meet all the learning needs of that class. And the aim of it is to develop their own research skills, evaluate evidence, and develop an argument. So what we try to do is take advantage of what students want to do on gallery. That's to run around and take pictures of stuff. It's a new environment for them all. They're not familiar with it. So they just want to get a sense of the gallery and just look at everything they can. So we ask them to go around the gallery and collect 5 items that are important to an inquiry question. So for our traders gallery, it's about the East India Company. So we ask them, what's the story of the East India Company? Collect 5 things that show how it affected lives of people in Europe and Asia. Off you go. Go take some pictures of some objects. Have a look at it. See what you can find. So they spend about 10-15 minutes doing that, just debating amongst themselves. We limit what they can take pictures of in terms of the number, so that they really have to think, what 5 things, there's like 300 objects in this gallery, what 5 things are important to you and your interpretation? And then the teacher will call them all back together and get them to present to one another. So what have you in this group, what do you think is important? What do you over in this group think is important? Oh, there's some similar objects there. Does that mean that's a really important object for us? Let's have that discussion together. And that's really important because nothing is right and nothing is wrong. It's all about your opinion. And we really get them having in-depth discussions, and the quieter members of the class really find that they start talking because we're not judging them. It's just an opinion. So that's really good. The second activity is for our Atlantic Gallery, which is about the transatlantic trade. We get them to set their own question. What's your question for this gallery? So it's a slavery day that they're focusing on. So we get them to set a question about enslavement. It could be anything right from the simple, very basic question, was slavery a good thing? They have to go find evidence on this gallery that answers their question or contradicts their question. It's about gathering that evidence. And no question is wrong and no question is right. It's about getting them to think about the topic. For our traders gallery, it's a gallery that uses lots of different voices to tell a difficult history. So we give one group one quote from the gallery that appears on the walls, and another group a different quote from around the gallery that appears on the walls. So it's those different voices. And we really bring those quotes to life by having an actor voice it out to them so they feel that person coming alive. And we also break it down into more understandable language for them. So this quote's quite difficult. What the hell is profligacy? I have no idea. So we really use language that resonates with them, but give them that original quote for that sense of history. And then with those questions or that quote, we ask them to go out again into the gallery and try and gather evidence to prove or disprove it. They can collect as many things as they like. We're not, going to stop them if they collect 5, at least if they've really thought about that 5, or if they want to just collect as many as they can first, take lots and lots of pictures, and then sift through it later on for when they present back to their class. And we constantly remind them, what am I doing? What am I doing? Just, to reinforce what they're up to. And they have all those usual things of, I can delete this image, or I've deleted the wrong one, I can bring it back. So you can see off on the side there's, icons for swiping things back in again. And we use the language of the web, so bookmarking things, tagging things, favoriting things. So they're already familiar what these icons and these symbols are about. So when they take pictures of these objects, we use an optical search system that scans our database of objects, and it identifies what you're looking at. And it says, oh, you're looking at this lovely painting. Here it is. Here's our version of your picture. We must remember to give them their own picture because they got totally confused when we said, oh, no, your picture's a bit rubbish. Here's our lovely one. They're like, no, it's my picture. I want it. So we give them our version of the picture as well, done by a lovely photo studio. And we give them this targeted information that's written specifically for them and their study day. And we also link off to other audio, other media that helps them interpret the study day, the gallery, and this object. But we also link off to other objects that might not be on this gallery, but is very important to this history. So that's quite a lot of manuscript material that often gets cut out because it doesn't survive on gallery so well. So they can link off from this object that they've taken a picture of, this other object over here, and from that one to another object. So it's like a web of knowledge that they're creating their own pathways through our collections to collect them and then come back to the school group going, oh, well, I found this object over here, which I linked through to, and then present that back to the school group. So they're all about gathering evidence and finding links through and resources off to other evidence. And we've also provided them a dictionary, which is that icon over in the corner with a question mark. And that's really important for the school kids because there's a lot of difficult words on gallery and maybe even in our descriptions that they might not be familiar with. And we give them the power to say, look, I don't understand this word. I can easily look it up without actually having to stand out in front of the class, go over to teacher, go over to one of the learning team, go, look, I don't understand what this means. They can easily just do it because they're in charge of their own learning. So they can tag, really bring their thoughts together as to why they collected this object, why they liked it over the other ones, just kind of help them clarify when they're arguing back to their peers why they collected this one and not others. So we're really using language of what they expect to do on other applications outside of the museum using the web. We also get the teachers involved because teachers like to have fun too. They can take part in the experience, collect their own objects with the kids as well. And they can also check in on the process of what the kids are doing, but also send them messages like, I can see what you're doing, put that down. And they can also edit the time settings of the experience. So they can really see that the class is getting into the first activity, so say, oh, we'll just focus on doing this, let's ignore task 2, so they can extend it. Or, maybe shorten it. Oh, the class has already done it. Let's finish it in 5 minutes and move on to task 2. So really getting the teacher in charge of what's going on and helping them facilitate what they do already so well, but using the technology. Because if you don't get the teachers buy-in with the activity, you're not going to get a really good experience with the school group. And then afterwards, from that visit to the museum, back in class, they're more likely to use your resources that you provide them afterwards if they're bought into the experience. So they can send the message to the teams, and everyone's got their own little flag. And then we provide all the content that the kids have done on gallery, all the objects they've collected, their pictures, our pictures, their comments, their tags, back to the teachers in a format that we all know that they love, PowerPoint. So we said we can give you everything we've done any way you like. How would you like it? PowerPoint. Okay, fine. We will give you that. Hand it over to them on a USB and say, right, there's all the things that you can do, all that your students have collected. Off you go and have fun with that back in class. Continue that experience. So they can then tailor the needs of the class back in school. So I just wanted to talk about the challenges that we faced. Encouraging users to look up from the tablet screen to the object. We noticed that during our initial evaluation with the students, it was more like an English comprehension test. They weren't looking at the objects, they were just going straight over to the object labels and reading it, trying to find answers in there. Because that's what they expected to do, hunt for an answer on the gallery, it must be in the label. It's like, no, look at the object. We want your interpretation of this primary source, this object. So that was really important. And then when we were talking to them about the technology, we said, okay, what do you want to do? And they said, I'd like to see this object in 3D. You're standing in front of the object. It is in 3D, people. Like, oh, yeah.
But they're used to see the world through a computer.
Exactly. So trying to get them away from the technology was kind of really important. And again, we've said this several times during this week, that kids don't read text. So we started using videos and graphics to help them understand what they're supposed to do. And we also introduced the tablets with the whole experience of how to use these things. They don't care. They already knew. Don't have to sit here for 2 minutes to explain how these tablets work. I already know. Just make it intuitive and meet the technology that we use every day, and they'll be able to pick it up easily. The teachers were more afraid of touching the damn things than anybody else. So those are the main challenges. Just to pick up on the technology that we use on Gallery, we use the Cortexica Vision Systems, which is the image recognition, so it compares the images that the kids take on Gallery with a database of our lovely images that we take with the tablet, so it's comparing like for like. And then we use Awilock Wi-Fi positioning system, so it knows whereabouts in the gallery you are when you're taking that picture, because we've got some lovely Canons. They all look the same. So it's a Canon at one end of the gallery and a Canon at the other end of the gallery, and it knows that you're looking at this one down this end of the gallery. So it's that kind of, kids like to kind of challenge it to see what they can take pictures of that all look the same and then compare it with each other. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing with this experience, and it's going really well actually, and the kids seem really, really engaged, and we know the teachers are following up then again back in school.
For how long have you been using this now?
We launched it in April, and it's been going for the end of that term, summer break, and then so since September again till now.
Perfect. Let's open it to questions. Rose, 1 second, because otherwise I won't record it.
Nice job. It looks really cool. So how many students can you have doing it at one time? And is it, and part B of that question is, does a school come with 100 kids in general, and then are they all able to use the tool?
So we do it generally with a class of probably about 30, because that's the general class size in the UK. We can handle probably up to around 60 kids if that's one tablet between two. So it's very important we're doing this in, everyone doesn't have their own tablet. It's about having that discussion with each other rather than having your own device. So someone may hold it, but we have seen them passing it around and having those discussions. So someone may do one thing with the tablet, and someone may do another thing with the tablet. So really, how many people can you get around a tablet? 2, 3, that's the way we seem to be working. And we will do more than one session per day. So yeah, quite a few.
And 2 other questions. So how many staff are involved, museum staff involved on the floor when they're using the tool? And then also, is somebody in the background grabbing all this stuff and putting it on the USB before you give it them?
So there's, at the moment, 1 member of the learning staff. We're hoping to put that down to no members of learning staff and just the gallery system that's already there. It's about the teacher leading these sessions, doing what they already do, and allowing the kids to go off around the gallery and have this focused experience. Hopefully we'll get back down to the 1 visitor assistant that's already in gallery and get them to build up their confidence, so the staff in the museum are learning about these technologies as well and having that learning experience along with the kids. Sorry, what's the second part?
The second part was, when is the USB part created? Because you have to gather up all those devices, and how does that work?
Yeah, so the member of the learning staff will, at the moment they're in gallery, so they take the tablets back off, and then they all filter down to 1 room. It's just a simple plug-in, press a button and take it off again for the USB and hand it over. So it's a very quick, simple process. It knows exactly, okay, you've put the USB in now, you want the last session that was done, burn it onto the USB and just hand it over to the teacher who's then in there in the next room.
So it's pulling it off of a server database?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Are there any other questions? one. So, is this a special option that you offer for school tours, or is it the standard option that you offer? And then do the teachers get to choose which option eventually they want to do?
So this is part of a study days that school groups book. So they will have already been approaching these topics within their normal class sessions. So they're not approaching it cold. They're already thinking about the topics and what it means. So yeah, they book it prior to coming to the museum.
But do they have a choice between a more traditional sort of guided visit and this, or is it the only option?
No, they can, if they don't want to do it, they don't have to.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
Question about the wayfinding. Like, what were the challenges when you actually used it in the gallery? Like, being in a small gallery, and like, how did it make sense to be like, oh, these are the objects near you? Like, could you talk a little bit about that?
So it works on Wi-Fi strength. So we have probably about 10 points around the gallery. And it just so when the tablet connects to a Wi-Fi point, it says, oh, well, this signal strength is stronger at this one, and it's weaker over there, therefore I must be in section A. So that it's a very simple system. I mean, it's used mainly in industrial factories, and I think it's used by the US Army as well. So, it's very rugged, and it's very much positioning people to within, I think it's 50 centimetres. So it really knows where you are within that gallery space. I mean, we don't use it to its full extent at the moment, but it allows more capabilities for the future if it's already installed.
One last question.
Well, technical question. So if I understand it, when the kids save the work on their iPad, it's saved to your central server, and then it's saved within a single folder for the entire class, and that's why it's so easy to get onto the USB. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all saved onto our museum server, and then it's all converted into a PowerPoint present. So it's just a PowerPoint file that we just burn straight onto USB.
So there's no person who needs to do any of it's formatted immediately.
Yeah.
Every slide gets its own slide as if it's a PowerPoint thing.
Exactly, and it's all those assets are editable within there, so it's not a static PowerPoint. They can pull out those assets from that PowerPoint and use them however they want outside of the class, so they can copy and paste them into whatever they want to do with them, create their own posters, and yeah.
Thanks.
How long did it take you to develop the system and test it and get all your formative evaluation done?
So it probably took around about a year, but the project was kind of continually changing its scope. So it was kind of roped into another project and then separated out again. So that other project is something I'm working on now, and it is the second stage of this project for families and general audiences within the museum. So it took longer than it should have. So it took about a year. But all that work's done now, so I'm about to do another gallery, which will take probably 2 months, and that's getting all the content written and everything. So the evaluation process was continual right from the start. We thought about it before we went out, going, really, what do we want to achieve before we even approach designers? And we're constantly doing it. I think this system is beta and always should be beta. We should be building on what we do and constantly evaluating again and again to see how we can improve it with the changing needs and the changing curriculums that we have.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Lucinda. Are you set, Shelley? Almost. We're going to stay in London, but we're just moving to the other side of the river, to the British Museum. We have Shelley Mannion here with, wait a second, Digital Learning Program Manager at the British Museum. She manages the Samsung Center there and the family and school programs there. So, here to you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to start my timer. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about a similar application for teenagers that we developed at the British Museum. We did it on a much smaller budget and a much shorter time frame, and so hopefully this gives you an idea of what can be done maybe at the other end of the spectrum. The budget for this project, please don't tweet this, was about £5,000, which, I don't know, the conversion rate is what, $7,500 or something like that? Is that about right? Okay, so anyway, you can do the math. So £5,000 altogether for this project. We did it in maybe 6 weeks or so. I mean, some of the initial work we did sort of beforehand, exploratory work and consultation work with some of our educators and curators. But yeah, the actual development was about 6 weeks. We built an application for secondary school students or high school students for an exhibition called Hajj, Journey to the Heart of Islam. So if you're not familiar, just to sort of introduce the concept, Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, one of the key principles in the religion of Islam. And as the 5th pillar, it is something which every Muslim is expected to do at least once before they die. And Hajj is a pilgrimage to Mecca, which occurs at a particular time in the Islamic calendar each year. Right? So this exhibition was far more popular than the museum anticipated. There's a large Muslim population in the UK, and it completely transformed the face of the museum while this exhibition was going on. So while the typical visitors to the museum are generally older visitors and predominantly sort of white upper middle class visitors, the visitors to this exhibition were families, young families, and also lots of intergenerational visiting. So a family would come with mother, father, children, cousins, grandparents, aunts, uncles. It really did transform the museum, and particularly for young people, it was a really interesting opportunity for us. We offered 2 different types of sessions. So we had a program aimed at primary school students, which was non-digital, so it was based upon kind of costumed interpretation. And then we had a digital activity for teenagers. All right, so who were our audience? So we ran 18 sessions. They were initially scheduled to run for an hour each, although we found that we ended up running over a bit, so it was about an hour and 10 minutes each session. We had 12 schools, 270 students during the run of the exhibition. The age was between 12 and 17, and the average age of the students who did this activity was 14. We had 60% girls and 40% boys. Let's see if we can get this back here.
I'll hold this for you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, sorry about that. I do have to warn you that almost all my pictures are of boys. All right, I'm really sorry, but the 2 days the photographer came to take photographs of this session, they were almost all boys. Okay, so don't be misled by that. There were actually more girls than boys. And we had both Muslim and non-Muslim. The majority of students who took part were Christian. But certainly one of the aspects of religious education, which in the UK is a required curriculum subject, we don't know whether that will continue or not. And there are obviously a lot of faith-based schools in the UK as well. So, I mean, this is the reason why this is an interesting topic for us. And so one of the challenges clearly is that you have both believers and non-believers that take part in the same activity. And so there's a lot, as you might imagine, there's a lot of sensitivity that goes into designing these applications. And that's certainly part of the consultation phase, is really understanding what are the sensitive issues and how to design activities which are not patronizing to a believer, but equally accessible for a non-believer. All right? These were our learning objectives. These were the things that we focused on when we designed the application. We wanted it to be experienced focus using objects as support. So in this case, the objects weren't necessarily central, maybe slightly unusual in terms of museum education, but we wanted to foreground experience and experiential learning because this was about religion and a religious experience that is transformational. We wanted it to be playful. We wanted to incorporate game-like elements, but we didn't want it to be silly or disrespectful. We wanted to, as much as we could, simulate the experience and reflection of that pilgrimage inspires. So this wasn't necessarily just about pilgrimage of Hajj or the experience of Hajj, but actually about what does pilgrimage mean? What is that as an essential concept to many world religions? We wanted, and this was actually a really interesting one, to convey both the personal and communal experience. And this actually influences our choice for each participant, each student having their own device. Right, and I'll talk more a bit about that in terms of our evaluation and how that worked. We had done other projects with high school students where we had them work in groups with one device, so similar to what was done at the National Maritime Museum, and we found we struggled with that. We found that there was a lot of conflicts within the groups. For the most part, the groups, if they were friendship groups, tended to work pretty well. But if the groups were assigned by the teacher, in other words, they were ability groups, there was a lot of conflict about who was going to use the technology, and the learning broke down because the groups argued. And in this case, we really were sort of focusing on that intensely personal experience, and we wanted to punctuate that with some social moments or some communal moments. And we wanted to accommodate different types of learners. This is sort of, I'm a firm believer in learning styles. And one of the things that I try and do in approaching any activity is to really think about, particularly because technology provides us the opportunity to address alternative learning styles, whereas I think traditional museum education tends to focus very much on either visual or verbal learning, that technology really allows us to expand beyond that. Okay, so just very, very quickly, this was the introductory screen on the left and the main menu on the right. We worked in a linear fashion. That was dictated by the exhibition itself, but also because of the fact that Hajj itself is a progression, a series of rituals that's completed over a certain number of days. So it itself is linear, and we wanted this activity to parallel that. We tried to incorporate a whole variety of different styles of activities. And again, this goes back to learning styles. We were also looking to maximize the opportunities that the phones, a new set of Android mobile phones, provided us. So we're dealing with touchscreens now, and we wanted to really touch and gesture, and we really wanted to incorporate those because, again, we thought that would help support the experiential learning. On the left-hand side, we had them do a sound recording. In the middle, we had them take photographs, so kind of similar, again, to the National Maritime, so taking photographs of things in the gallery. On the right-hand side, we had a drawing activity on the screen, which was incredibly popular in our evaluation. On the left, we had them choosing objects on a screen and getting a bit more information about them. In the center, we had them do a gesture activity where they circumambulated the Kaaba, which is an incredibly sacred building in the center of the complex in Mecca. And it's a central part of Hajj. And so we had them do finger circles on the screen. And on the right-hand side, we had them flicking stones off the edge of the screen. So the two that you see on the right were probably the most successful. One in simulating or giving the real experience of what the physical activity is like. And also just in terms of how that then supported experiential learning. We also did a little bit of traditional questions and answers. So as you can see, there's 3 steps to this. So it was locate an object in a gallery, answer a question about it, and check your answer. Just a very quick word about content. I'm focusing primarily on the video content here, although obviously having seen the screens, you know that we used pictures and some text and some sound recordings and things as well. But the videos were actually really interesting in terms of the evaluation. We had a series of videos which introduced each of the rituals on the left-hand side, which was much more factual. But on the right-hand side, and very successfully, we integrated these videos of pilgrims. So these were recorded at a local festival called Living Islam. You can see the boy on the right-hand side has got that T-shirt on. And these were first-hand accounts of people who had participated in Hajj or in something called Umrah, which is a pilgrimage to Mecca at another time of year, not during that sort of key period. And what their impressions were. And these videos were incredibly important for the experiential and sort of really emotional-based learning. So that was kind of an interesting element to this. All right, so we did some evaluation of this. And at this point, this is a good moment for me to acknowledge my collaborators. So obviously, you saw their names in the beginning, but Nick Badcott is my colleague at the British Museum who advised on content. Will Robinson was the programmer who we worked with, a freelance programmer who developed it. And Alessandra Van Esch is one of my former students from the University of Lugano who just completed her master's degree. And this evaluation was her master's. So what we did to evaluate is we had observations in the gallery while the sessions were happening. We did a content analysis, which we're still working on. I actually think content analysis is one of the most interesting ways to research digital learning projects. I think it's a very underused technique. What that means essentially is looking at the data and what is the content that students create, analyzing it, categorizing it, and trying to extract some insights about what students are doing and thinking by looking at what they make. So we're still sort of in the middle of that, but we looked at the sound recordings that they made and also the images that they drew. We surveyed roughly a third of the students, so 88, and 8 teachers then who accompanied those groups. All right, so I'll share with you a bit about the results of the evaluation, just see how I'm doing on time. All right, so name something you learned today, all right? What kinds of learning happened, and did we accomplish our goals in terms of realizing sort of the experiential and emotional learning? So you can see there that these are the responses categorized into groups. All right, the category general was not particularly useful for me because these students were saying, oh, I learned about Hajj. I learned about the rituals of Hajj. Okay, well, yeah, they were learning about that in school anyway, so that wasn't particularly useful for us. 37% of the learning was factual, and those were, really sort of very straightforward facts. I'll show you some examples in a moment. Obviously, we were pleased that 27% listed something that had an emotional connection or some type of experiential connection. And there were 2 types of those, really. I'll explain that in a moment. And functional has to do, it's closely connected with emotional and factual. It has to do with understanding something about Hajj, or about some of the objects which fits, and understanding its connection, how that then functions within the religion or within the world of someone who is a Muslim. All right, so these give you a clearer example of the kinds of things that they were learning. So at the top, we've got that general category. And again, this was certainly one of the weaknesses of this evaluation, is that we didn't interrogate those kinds of answers with follow-up interviews. All right, so if I were to do this again, and I had more resources, then I would certainly change the research model and interrogate these areas which clearly need a bit more work done. Factual. The second one is probably really a perfect example. I learned that 99,000 people went from Nigeria. Okay, that's fantastic. It's great that they learned that. It's not necessarily the type of learning we were going for, but that's absolutely fine, particularly if this student, as many of the students who attended the session were, is from Nigeria. So then that's a personal connection that they've made. Functional. Let's see. The one at the top, people throw stones at a wall to release their selfishness and anger. All right, so that's understanding what the ritual is, fundamentally, which is throwing stones at a pillar, right? But even more, they've understood what the purpose of that ritual is within the context of Islam and within the context of Hajj, which I find that really important. And finally, emotional, all right? So these are that Hajj can increase Muslims' love for the Prophet Muhammad, and then that's an honorific peace be upon him. That's an abbreviation afterwards, which is very often used after Muhammad. That some people didn't really feel connected to Allah, but after Hajj, they did. And I think that's really interesting when we look at then where the learning came from, because that very last quote that I read to you, some people didn't feel connected, but after they went to Hajj, they did, came specifically from one video that someone watched. Yeah? So there was one video in which there was a woman from South Africa describing her experience and the fact that she had trouble making that spiritual connection before she went on Hajj, and afterwards that was renewed, that was sort of opened up for her. So I found it really interesting that as much as I tried to really incorporate those sort of emotional or experiential aspects into the app, where people got that was from the videos rather than from the app. Yeah? So in other words, if I look at where this learning is coming from, and I think, yeah, here we go. So 49% of those sort of, what did I learn today, came from the app. So it was factional and functional things came from the app. Emotional and functional, though, came from the videos of the pilgrims. So at least in this context, the videos functioned much more for experiential learning and sort of emotional learning than the app did. And then it was a facilitated session as well, and 20% of the sort of factual knowledge then came from the teacher. So I was in many ways reassured by this when I looked at the evaluation, because I was concerned that quite a bit of the information was coming from me leading the session. But fortunately, it wasn't. I think in interest of time, I'm actually going to skip over this video, but I'll put the presentation online and you can have a look at it to give you a sense of really how these videos brought across that emotional and that sort of emotional and experiential learning. All right, so styles of interaction. Circle your favorite task and why you liked it. Now, I mentioned this before. The drawing, as you can see there on the left, was incredibly popular. And the interesting thing was this was not in our original design. We put the drawing in order to control the group as they moved through the gallery. So there was a moment where we had them split up, right? We had these individual and communal moments. So for the question and answer, the sort of quiz type questions that I showed you before, that was the moment in which they split up into groups, right? And they each worked in a different area. To bring them together again, though, required us to have a sort of filler activity, right? So in other words, the groups that finished more quickly then needed something to do while we were waiting for the other groups, and that became this drawing activity, which we inserted at the last minute because we thought we need something here, all right? And I found it incredibly surprising that it ended up being the thing that people liked to do the best. So I have some sort of theory about this, which is at this point more anecdotal. I think it definitely needs more research and sort of more analysis. But the drawing was hugely popular. Watching videos, voice recordings, and interestingly, answering questions was the least popular activity. All right, so here we go. This is what people said about why they liked what they did. Okay, so what they enjoyed about the drawing activity was that it was creative. It was enjoyable, it was easy, entertaining, engaging, artistic, and it helped me develop my skills, which I thought was interesting. Watching the videos, not surprisingly, right, because we saw that most of this sort of emotional learning came from the videos, were emotions, experience, and insight. I've not got any specific words. When it's in brackets there, that indicates a sort of a paraphrase of what those remarks were. But the voice recording was really interesting because it was performative. I hadn't really realized that it would have that element or aspect to it, but it did. And then answering questions had to do with information and knowledge, which then again corresponds with the facts that they accumulated or that they got from that. So this is, again, the drawing activity, hugely popular. These are some examples of the drawings. As I said, which are very varied, as you can see. We're still working, as I said, on the content analysis of this. So, I mean, as it goes a little bit further, I'm kind of interested to see kind of what categories these end up in. This is a Wordle of those descriptions that students gave about why they liked different sections of the app. Right? So you can see that loads and loads of people are saying they found it fun, interesting, and interactive. Right? They also said educational, memorable, engaging. And it's interesting to me that the only really concrete thing here is photos. Right? They liked it because it had photos. So, I mean, we know, and this is what you mentioned as well, Lucinda, that photography is anyway just a hugely popular activity. Okay? It's clearly not the only one, but it is just incredibly popular. All right, so what does interactive mean in this context? Right, I mean, I have to say I found this incredibly problematic because I don't know what interactive means to these kids. And again, this is an area where obviously it needs, we need to follow up with interviews to find out exactly what they mean. We need to unpack that. But I sort of have at least an inkling. If I look at this quote from one of the students who said that the drawing activity was very creative, and you can remember it more if you do something yourself. All right, so the idea is obviously doing rather than listening. So it has to do with active creation or active content development rather than content delivery. All right, now those two things, content creation and content delivery, are part of another very extensive study that was done about mobile learning from a few years ago, and I'll share that reference with you in just a moment, because those two words are kind of highly significant when it comes to the sort of spectrum of passive learning and active learning. All right, so certainly there was, the drawing particularly had two elements of interactivity to it. There was the personal side of actually creating the drawing, all right, but then there was also the social side of showing the drawing that you made to someone else. And Lucinda mentioned this as well, that what we observed, and I was really pleased to see this too, because one of the concerns that we had initially was if we give each student a device and we give them headphones as well, will that then be an isolating experience? It was not the case. Not for this age group. We found that They talked to each other, they showed each other, they listened to each other's voice recordings. They talked all the time, right? Okay. So yeah, lots and lots of social interaction. There were a couple places where we initially had sort of designed some social interactions in, so there were some missed opportunities here that we didn't get to realize. But as I said, there was more social interaction than we had anticipated, right? They were not discouraged by wearing headphones. Okay, that means my time is up. So I'm going to quickly run through these and just pick out the most important points for you. As I said, the voice recordings were performative. And I'll just move ahead here. Okay, so where I feel like we succeeded the most, right? There were some areas where I think we did pretty well, and some other areas where we didn't do so well. The area where we did the best is down there in the left-hand corner, where it says that 23 students said that stoning the pillars, so flicking the stones off the edge of the screen, gave them feelings. It was meaningful. It was a meaningful experience. It made them think. It was satisfying. It was realistic. So that was another thing, that it was actually simulating well a physical activity from the real world. It gave them a connection, and it gave them a feeling of emotion, or the emotions that people experience when they do Hodge. All right. So this is an example of the activity in the real world, and these are some quotes from what students said, right? And so those words that I just showed you were pulled out. So this is one of the areas that I feel like we really succeeded, right? This activity did well. I mean, I think probably the third one down is my favorite. Able to find qualities of myself which I would like to lose. Because the principle of this was, as you flick these stones off the edge of the screen, you're actually getting rid of sort of negative qualities about yourself that you want to get rid of. Right? So it was cathartic. All right, so this is the reference that I mentioned before. It's from Froberg from 2009. This particular graph is from another student from the University of Lugano who'd done some evaluation work for us. And her name is Susanna Dahl. She's just, again, completed her master's earlier this year. But content delivery on the left is on the side of passive learning. So if we look at the traditional audio guide or traditional multimedia guide, very much on the side of content delivery, right? And on the right-hand side is content construction, creating things, right? And that is on the side of both active and situated learning. All right, where I feel that the Hodge application was somewhere in the middle, right? So only 11 of the 102 mobile learning apps, which Froberg and his colleagues looked at, used that guided reflective approach. And even fewer used the ones to the right. Okay. So at the top are the areas I feel like we succeeded, right? We did a guided reflection. We were sort of working across both novices and experts. And our objective was emotional and experiential. And these, on the left-hand side, those categories come from Froberg, okay? And where we kept with the status quo, in other words, where we didn't really push it, was in the area of communication, right? Even though there was a lot of social interaction, it wasn't necessarily prompted by the device. Right? It was a physical context, all right? That's not necessarily unusual. There were other museum sort of tours and guides that were analyzed by Froberg and that already exist. And control, full teacher control. Okay. So that brings me to the end. I think, again, I mean, certainly the areas where we could have improved were in content construction and networked activities to promote social interaction. There were more opportunities, or there should be ideally more opportunities for self-directed exploration. Right balance in terms of factual and experiential. So certainly, you know, I mean, if you're teaching some subject which has to do with really with personal reflection, then I think ideally you want to be in the world of experiential learning, right? And we need a better research model. In other words, I mentioned before, if I were to do this again, I would do more thorough observations. I would definitely add interviews. And I would also include a kind of a clear framework for the content analysis, which, as I said, is quite important. So I'm not sure if any of you are students, or if you know any students. But I'd certainly like to invite you to contact me if you're interested in doing some additional evaluation. Obviously, I'm asking for students because we don't have a budget for this. But certainly, if you're sort of, as I said, if you know anybody, then let them, please ask them to get in touch with me.
Thank you, Shelley. I think this presentation, sorry, hello, is putting everybody to shame to think that she did all of that in 6 weeks.
Not the evaluation.
Well done. Not on her own. Are there any questions? Yes.
Hi, that was really fantastic to hear about. I was just wondering two things. One's really technical, why you decided to use Android. And the other one, if you could talk a little bit about the guided reflection that you mentioned that was part of the experience, please. Thank you.
Okay. So the first question was, why did we decide to use Android? Our platform choice is dictated by our Samsung sponsorship. So because we're sponsored by a technology, we have a technology partner, then we're obligated to use their equipment. They provided us with about 20 Android phones, and those were the phones that we were using for the activity. So we're using, and as we do with all of our school programs, we're using our own devices. To be honest, that's the reason why we could do this on such a small budget, because we knew the platform that we were deploying to, and we were completely in control of what was on those devices. The second question was about the guided reflection. Just to say, I can, if you want to double check that Froberg reference with me, the guided reflection is a category or a categorization that Froberg and his colleagues came up with to classify mobile learning applications. So they examined thoroughly 102 mobile learning applications and classified them into their different kinds, how they were using the tool, how they were using the mobile phone. And guided reflection was one style of activity that they identified. I mean, here, obviously, we're moving a little bit into content construction as well, which is on the active end of their continuum, with the voice recordings and the drawings. Right. So we didn't stick only with guided reflection, but that's kind of more firmly where we were in their classification, which I found very useful because it helped me understand exactly where we were in terms of of how innovative we were being.
I just also want to say bravo, really, really well done. Can you talk a little bit, I'm curious about the content analysis and what you'll be looking at in the drawings. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just have a quick look at them. Let's go back. I mean, content analysis is really, again, trying to extract instead of applying a model from the top down, it's more like trying to extract a categorization scheme from the bottom up. Right? So in this case, and I mean with sort of other content analysis that I've done in the past, even though I've not done it extensively, it's really just literally looking at the data and trying to categorize it and asking multiple people to categorize the data and see whether there were trends which emerge. So in other words, one thing that I can certainly see here is the one second from the right is extraordinarily abstract. Right? So I mean, as I began to think about this, and as I said, we're sort of in the middle still of this process, but certainly the level of abstraction or degree of abstraction would be one thing. I think I would probably also look at, which then means that realistic might be on the other side. So if we look at the one in the lower left-hand corner, for example, incredibly detailed. I mean, in other words, with the tools that were available to them. I mean, obviously this is a very crude drawing tool. But on the left-hand side, they've incorporated a lot of detail of the flags, of the patterns, and the position of all the different architectural elements. So I mean, certainly sort of abstract and realistic would be one thing. I might look at the brush strokes. So in other words, it's interesting to me that the one from the second, at the top, second from the left, used the sort of bubble tool. They're little circles rather than kind of solid lines. I mean, I think one of the issues or one of the caveats here is that we obviously didn't look carefully at how they were using the drawing tool and its usability and its intuitiveness. So I mean, there's only so much I think that we could probably get from something looking at the brush strokes. If we had a clearer idea or a better idea of how easy to use, how intuitive the drawing tool was, then those types of things might become even more meaningful. But certainly, does that give you an idea? Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Quick one. No?
So I know this is a short-term exhibit, right? So
yes.
Right? So do you have plans to try this again in others or extend?
Yes, well, this is exactly why I was asking if there were any students out there who need a master's or a PhD project. What we're doing is taking the findings from this and applying them to a new application. So what we're working on right now, which we're going to start piloting in about a week's time, is an application which is an entirely self-led. At least that's where we're headed with it. So Lucinda mentioned that where they're headed as well is that this would be something could be unfacilitated by museum staff. So in other words, strictly, a term that I'd heard used to describe this type of thing by Ina Prugel from the Tower of London is she called it digital directed. So a digital directed activity is something which does not require facilitation by the museum. I mean, the teacher might be there, might be involved, might be facilitating it to some degree, but it's really the digital device and the application that is facilitating the activity. So that's sort of where we're headed, and what we're hoping to do is then to take some of these findings, is to put them into this new activity which will run in the permanent galleries. And certainly what we have the good fortune of being able to, as the licenses through which we secured that original video content of the pilgrims, allows us to then to continue using that, because based on the evaluation, I can see how powerful and how transformative those videos were.
Okay, thank you so much, Shelley. We're going to move on now to our last speaker. Our last speaker is Allegra Burnett, Creative Director, Digital Media at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, where she's in charge of web, mobile, and interactives in the gallery. So she also teaches an online museum program at Johns Hopkins University, and she's the director of the MCN board. So without any further ado, here's Allegra.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay, good. So this has actually been really fascinating for me to sit up here and listen to it while I'm freezing by the window. But I'm going to sort of take us a little bit in a different direction and actually go out of the galleries. So it's been really great for me to hear all this. And a mobile talent, which I'm also going to sort of talk a little bit about business models and money and things like that, how we do it and sustain it. Because those are sort of a lot of questions that we've been asking ourselves lately. So here's the entire story in one slide. I wanted to start by giving you the broader context for our mobile. For those of you who have heard me talk in the last couple of years, it really started when we began to offer our audio program for free to the public in 2004. That led to putting that online, which led to our iPhone and Android app, our mobile site, a couple of iPad apps that I will talk about, and then various mobile exhibition sites. So this year, 2012, I don't know how well you can see all that, but we've really been focusing primarily on the mobile exhibition websites and our new Art Lab app, which launched in June of this year, which is the primary focus of my talk today. We've also tried a lot of different formats for these types of projects. So whether it's native apps, hybrid app or mobile site, standalone mobile sites, mobile versions, and responsive design. So I feel like at this point we've tried a lot of different things for a lot of different projects, and we've certainly learned a lot along the way. But this particular tale I want to focus on today really has its foundation based in the years of digital media and education collaborating on digital projects. But for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to start in 2008. So that year, the education staff took what had until then been an unused space between the set of stairs and the entrance to the sculpture garden. You can see that sort of bleak-looking blank space underneath the stairs when you've got these wild Warhol cows on the left. And they turned it into an interactive space for families. The first space was called Color Lab. The following year was another one called Line Lab. Each of these labs introduced basic concepts with simple, open-ended explorations and using a variety of materials and a lot of different kinds of hands-on activities. Have you noticed I haven't shown you anything digital yet? The third in the series, Shape Lab, went up in 2010. Again, a lot of hands-on activities. In this image, this is one of the magnetic walls from Shape Lab. Kids and families were invited to create arrangements using shapes on these walls with simple prompts such as create a person, which I think is what they're doing right there. Or can you use geometric shapes to create a house or a city? So these basic prompts and shapes became the basis for the app that we developed for the iPad called the Art Lab app. I'm just going to show you a quick video about it.
The new MoMA Art Lab app for the iPad inspires creative play and invites a closer look at works from the Museum of Modern Art's collection. Play with shapes, lines, and colors. Create something, make a design, draw, or just experiment. Check out the Ideas section for some extra inspiration. You can do more than make art with MoMA Art Lab. Explore the artwork and process of artists like Elizabeth Murray and Henri Matisse through fun activities. Make sound poems.
Down. Run.
Up. Chance collages. Group drawings, and more. Save artwork in your gallery and share it with friends and family. MoMA Art Lab, inspiring all ages and available now in the App Store.
So I'm going to return back to talking about that app in a minute, but I wanted to go back a little bit again to the ABEX iPad app. So because we had just really launched that at the time that education started thinking about doing an app project really geared toward families. So we were sort of fresh off that experience. This app was available for free and was funded by the marketing department. Marketing was actually interested in seeing if reallocating resources that they might have traditionally put to a print ad into an app would actually yield greater returns in terms of promoting MoMA in general, and this exhibition and the collection in particular. In addition to high-resolution images of the works of art, audio, and interpretive texts, this app also included videos about the artists, techniques, and the exhibition itself. We've had over 200,000 downloads of the app, but I think more importantly, 2 years later, and more than a year after the exhibition closed, we still have a monthly average of about 10,000 visits to the audio and video content in the app that is hosted online. The average time spent on that content is close to 10 minutes, and 62% of the visits are repeats. So I don't know how many visits to the museum all this translates to, but anecdotally, a number of people posted on social media that using the app made them want to come and see the show and see the collection. So I think in the end, marketing would really agree that they did get that return on investment that they were looking for. And going back even one step further, shortly before we launched that app, we released our free MoMA app for the iPhone and Android. And while the iPad app was about enhancing and promoting one particular exhibition, about a key work of art, key art movement that's represented in our collection, the general MoMA app was about broad access of information to as many people as possible. It includes the audio tours, visiting information, as well as information about works and artists in our collection. So 2 years later, this app has had approximately 1 million downloads, and we average about 50,000 visits to the online content through the app each month, with about 10,000 new downloads a month. And we're currently in the process of sort of thinking, what the next version of this app will be, so stay tuned for that. So when we decided to make an app geared toward families, one of the many questions, we asked ourselves a lot of questions and asked a lot of other people many questions. One of the questions we've asked was, can you make an app that is actually financially self-sustaining? As I was talking about, we had very good results with our free apps, but what would happen if we tried something different and charged for this one? So we started by researching the field and looking for other apps in the marketplace. There weren't very many museum apps for kids, especially ones for tablets. We hired a consultant who specialized in developing interactives for kids to work with us, and we talked to a bunch of people, both about content but also about business models. And Sesame Workshop, actually, in particular, was very helpful and open in talking to us. And they even offered tips on pricing schemes and gave us feedback. So we really felt like it was worth trying this app as a paid one. We had a dedicated niche audience, an opening in the marketplace, really solid content, and a great team. And I should point out that we didn't go into this thinking we were going to make lots of money, but we did want to see if we could break even so that we could sort of keep feeding back into this process and this cycle. And at the time, we thought, hey, somebody must be making revenue in the App Store, right? Yep, it's these guys. Angry Birds is still at the top, only now they've got Princess Leia buns on them. This is actually from yesterday, so all this time later, Angry Birds in yet another form is still #1. So I love the Princess Leia buns, though. I'm going to have to get that one. So where we are in terms of our app, I'm kind of going to jump to the punchline and say that no, so far we haven't made money, and we haven't broken even. We did decide to release the app at $4.99 after a lot of discussion and talking to a lot of other people. We had this sort of interesting debate because we didn't want it to feel like a cheap app in a way at 99 cents or $1.99. But $4.99 was really, you know, sort of the sweet spot that we were getting from a lot of feedback. So, you know, and from a lot of people who actually had released paid apps for families, including Sesame. But if you take out Apple's cut, at the moment we're just about a third of the way to breaking even. There's a reason why I don't have actual dollar numbers in here, and it's kind of an interesting story because the cost of the app was not a market rate. We did an RFP and got several proposals from several different companies. Fortunately, the group with the best proposal was actually also the most reasonable. If we had chosen one of the other companies, this is where we'd be right now. So we're actually, you know, we're working with somebody who came in about 1/4, I think, of what some of the other budgets were. So, you know, it's kind of interesting, and part of the reason why I don't want to reveal the number is I feel like they were doing something for us because they had a real faith in what we were trying to do and a real interest in participating in the project, and it was not about making the money for them. And so I think, you know, we want to be able to kind of support those vendors and those developers. And they're also friends, so. So I've given you the results, but I want to kind of unpack and explore this a bit further. You've seen some of the content in the video, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about the format. We debated what platform to use, and we ultimately decided, and the content really decided the device direction. We felt like kids needed the larger screen of a tablet to be able to successfully engage in the activities that we were planning. Plus, our app wasn't really meant to be used in the gallery, so portability wasn't a chief concern. They could sit and use the activities. And all of us at that point had experienced young kids using an iPad and just picking something up and being able to do it in 2 seconds, and really thought it was the right format for this audience, the experience we were creating. We knew that deciding to use a tablet and not a smartphone would limit the potential audience pool, and using an iPad would reduce it further. But sorry, I'm like shivering over here in the corner. So if you hear my teeth chattering, thank you. I could hear myself going. I warned you that it was going to be cold in here. Thank you. But MoMA's audience in general is more iOS leaning than Android, and there was no clear leader at the time among Android tablets. So that that all led to into our iPad decision. And when we launched the app, for marketing, we did a MoMA press release, as well as a PR Newswire press release, which really got the news out much more broadly. The app was also included in the museum's summer campaign. This image shows the top part of a full-page ad that ran in the New York Times. And we were fortunate enough to work with the Apple App Store people and got featured in a banner, which starts to make you think, hey, Angry Birds, we're coming up on you, right? And we did actually get to number 4 top grossing, and 4 and 5. We were in the top of the paid education apps, which again, it makes you think, rounding up on Angry Birds, right? Wrong. Those positions basically translated into just over $2,000 in revenue. Right? Okay. So what it starts to make you realize is that there are there's a very thin layer of apps in the store that are actually making money. And I'm really curious as to how many of those are in the education category. But on the positive side, we've really gotten a lot of good feedback and comments and a lot of great press and blog features. We were one of 5 top apps for creative kids in USA Today. And we even won a Parents' Choice Award, which was kind of fun. But again, in terms of all of that, 6 months later, this is where we are in terms of return. So I think the question that I ask is, do we think this means that the project has been unsuccessful? But no, because I think while we were interested in exploring new business models, that wasn't why we did it in the first place. This is. And this. And this. So where do we go from here? One of the things we are doing is, trying to get more word out about it, because we notice that every time we say something about it, we get a little bump. And so we actually have installed it in the left image is in the cafe, and the right is actually the app in the interactive art lab space. We're also working on several new activities to add. And we're going to play around with the pricing. Our plan is not yet totally finalized, but I think what we're going to do is try dropping the price significantly post-Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday, and then maybe bringing it back up, but not necessarily back up to $4.99. Leave it there through the holidays and possibly beyond. I think we'll reevaluate the pricing when we're ready with the new features. One of the things that we have learned from our other apps is the day after Christmas, you get a nice big spike because everybody's got their new devices and they're looking for things to download. So that's kind of an interesting thing for us to keep in mind about how we deal with this pricing structure. So, I mean, I don't have the results, obviously, of that, but I think it'll be interesting to see what playing around with that does. So at the end of the day, I have to say I'm really happy with this app. Do I wish we had a wider audience for it? Yes. But I think we still have an opportunity to really get it out further, and I think the whole thing has been actually a very valuable experience for us in understanding our place in the broader market. And ultimately, the audience we created this for really seems to like the content and the activities. The app was actually really developed for kids, and during the testing that we did while we were creating the app, we bumped up the age a little bit to sort of 7 and up. And originally, we didn't have much in the way of, I'm going to be perfectly timed. We didn't have much in the way of sort of sharing features because they were really targeting it for, this younger audience. But when we started to show it around, everybody was like, well, I want to do it. It's really for me, too. And so, we were like kids of all ages, right? So we did add more sharing features with the ability with the parental control, so you could turn that on or off depending on what you wanted to do with that. You could share it to your gallery or then save it or then share it elsewhere. And one of the features that we added, and I'm really glad that we did, was the ability to share it with us. So we have a few of these, and I just wanted to show them. This is Dylan, who's age 8 from Chicago. This is Thomas, who's age 7 from Beijing. And some of these are done through the activities, and some of them are done in this sort of free-form drawing area. This is Cheryl, who's 61 from Alexandria, Virginia. This is also Cheryl. Whoops. This is Maria Clara, who's age 20 from Brazil. This is Richard, who is 83 from Syracuse, and he actually says in his age 83, parentheses, 84 in September. So happy birthday, a little late. And this was clearly done through the, in the Exquisite Corpse kind of activity where you're, doing the shared drawing, but this is somebody who's a 40-year-old and 27 from Ireland. And this may be my favorite. This is Charlie, who's 4 from Brooklyn.
Oh my God.
But I'm
the parents are going to be in trouble.
I know. My theory about this is Charlie, age 4, is doing this drawing with a parent, perhaps his mother. I'm guessing by the shape in the middle, and I'm guessing this may be around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the witching hour for kids. So. This one's, I love it. I think it's great. So either that or he's a very sophisticated 4-year-old. And then last but not least, I think we really knew that we had hired the right company, not only because they were willing to work with our small budgets, but also because this is the drawing that they created when they were testing the app. So can't really beat that one. So that's it. Thank you. And thank you for your coat.
Why don't you come and sit over here while I ask the questions?
Hello? This one is the worst. Can I have maybe the other? Oh. Sorry. Exactly. Oh, it's so much warmer over here. Again, another example of yeah. Hello. Well, okay. Another incredible example from MoMA of sort of incredible mobile strategy that they've implemented in the past few years. So, questions from the audience. Okay, let's start with Patricia.
Did you say which company developed that app for you?
Yeah, it's sorry, that company called Render Monkey, and it's actually one of the people in it is a former staff member in our department, so he didn't go far, and they've done a few projects with us and do really great work. So it was a lot of fun, but you know, I was very conscious of my personal relationship with them in this decision, and so. We really made sure that we did RFPs and that education was actually really leading the choice in who we went with, because you know, I didn't want them to feel like we had pushed them into some decision. And they were the ones who actually said, you know, this is actually the most creative proposal. And so that was good.
Okay. Actually, can I take advantage? I don't know if that can help you, but we installed are in the process of installing some iPads for free drawing activity in our family studio. And we looked at the MoMA app, which we thought was the best out there. Unfortunately, we could not customize it to kind of make it fit for our needs, so we ended up choosing another one and then paying the company that created it to customize it a little bit. Do you think that this company might be interested at sort of to do something like this for other museums? You guys would let them? Is there a possibility for the museum to kind of build on this?
Yeah, and quite frankly, I think with that particular case, Charlie, I think, asked me about it, and it was more about the timing.
Okay.
Because we had already had them booked up. But I think that, yeah, I mean, it was not something that we thought about when we developed the app, but what has come out of that, from that, and a couple of other instances of people wanting to be able to use that. The activities themselves, I didn't really talk about this much, but they're very focused on the collection objects. So that's also the trickier thing, is that they're so connected. So I think it's, in order to really make it appropriate for another institution, you'd have to really look at their collection and what activities would make sense around those objects. But yeah, and actually, it's installed in. I'm blanking on where exactly. I think it might be in Cincinnati somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that you had free apps previously, and if you analyzed the effect of charging versus the number of downloads for free apps?
Yeah, I mean, I think that doing this over again, I think we'd probably argue that it's not really worth charging. You know, but this was also, at the time that we made that decision, there was so much we didn't know, you know, and part of the reason I actually wanted to talk about this is that we don't talk about it. We don't sort of say this worked or didn't work, or it made money or it didn't make money. And so I had a really hard time understanding whether we could, you know, make this sustainable. And so I think it was worth doing. What I think we want to do now is make sure that, you know, we can kind of get past that conversation and make the app available to people who want to use it. But you know, the funny thing is that $4.99 really is such a stumbling block, you know, because you know, and it's this sort of mental perceptions of these numbers that are actually all quite small when you think about it. But then, yeah, I mean, in terms of, you look at the numbers of downloads that's part of the reason why I've talked about the ABEX app. You look at the number of downloads for that and the return, but the expectation was not about sustainability. It was you know, about promotion and things like that too. But promotion with an educational purpose, not just a kind of marketing message.
Hi, sorry. Were you ever thinking about doing a light version, like a free light version, where you would probably be able to integrate a bit more marketing aspects into the...
Yeah, we did. We talked about like in-app purchases too and things like that. But I think all of us. I mean, I have a niece and a nephew, and a lot of kids, you know, friends with little kids, and you know, all of us had a story about some
bad in-app purchase experience. Like suddenly you get a $30 bill for something that you didn't realize. And so it's, I think, tricky to do in-app purchases when you're targeting a young audience like this because, you know, and we just decided that was going to be too complicated. And we're also, you know, we're doing this project in addition to, you know, all the other ones that these guys talked about this morning and all the other projects. So, you know, how much are you kind of breaking it down into those little pieces? We didn't know that, like, we'd have such a difference between a light version and a non-light version that it would make a difference.
Sorry, I didn't mean like in-app purchases. I just meant like maybe you would be able to promote traveling exhibits or temporary exhibits inside your app, so that usually when you download a light version, you kind of accept the ads that come up once in a while because it's free.
Right. Yeah, no, that's yeah, sort of do our own ads in it kind of thing, or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, it'd be something interesting to look at. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a silly question. I'm just wondering if we're going to have the Princess Leia balls make their way into the app.
Well, what I want to know is, do they fall off when they hit the thing?
Hello, I have used the Art Lab on site and also really enjoyed it. I haven't used the app, but I was wondering, is there a relationship between the on-site and the app experience, and was that something conscious you did when you were designing it?
Yeah, well, and you know, I didn't sort of make that point quite as directly, but I was hoping that with the images, which hopefully you could see on the screen, you know, even the shapes that were used in the on-site experience were shapes that we used in the app. There was a lot about the activities that were in the museum that we thought about. You know, how do we translate that into this kind of environment? So the idea is that if you had been to the Art Lab space at MoMA and then used the app, it would feel familiar. But then, you know, you could also not ever come to the museum and still have an experience. So yes, I mean, the idea was that it was very much grown out of that experience and those activities. And the look of it, too. The designer in graphic design was very involved with us with the project and giving feedback to the designer and things like that. So she's the one who had created all those identities for the walls and things like that.
So then have you found that there is a relationship and visitation to the museum itself?
I don't know that that's a really good question. And I don't know that we have the answer to that yet. I also, the question I realize that I don't have the answer to yet either is whether putting those in the museum, you know, the installation in the cafe and the one in the art lab, whether that's had an impact on our downloads. We sort of just have done that recently, so we haven't really looked at a cause and effect to that, but it'll be interesting, especially with the holidays coming up and how busy things get there, that, you know, if that has an impact.
Yes. Just to follow up on that, is there any connection between the app and your collections? Like, I saw that there's something about Matisse, but I wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
sorry, the video kind of goes by pretty quickly, I think. Yeah, all of the, so there's a free-form drawing experience that has these prompts in case you kind of have artist block or whatever, and then, or you can just do, you know, your own drawings and things. But then there's this other section that's about activities, and each of the activities is based on a work of art at the museum. So when I showed those sort of stripy drawings at the end that the kids had done, those are based on a Jim Lambie piece that was installed at the museum, and there's a video of the piece, and then the sort of colored stripe idea is something that you then play around with. So you learn something about the work or the artist, and then you have this related activity.
Allegra, I was wondering whether you were planning or thinking of doing an analysis of the type of learning that occurs through these activities.
Yeah, and we did do a lot of, that would be the royal we, of course. We did do a lot of evaluation and during the process, we have not done as much since then. But I think, as we're kind of gearing up to do a new round of activities, we certainly want to do that so that, the next set of activities are as good as they can be and balance out what we've learned from these. It is interesting to sort of have this perception of what you think is going to be the activity that people really like, and then find out that maybe that's not the case. I guess it goes back to, the drawing idea.
And I actually would like to conclude on this note, and I want to put a little bit my evaluator hat and my visitor-centered advocate here, and really, I'm really happy to see that in all three presentations, in all three projects, there was an effort to really involve the user. I mean, with the Lucinda at the beginning of the process with focus group, with Shelley, an extensive evaluation of the experience that kids had, the type of learning that occurs, and then with Allegra, building on the experience that they had in the physical space and doing initial work. So this is really important. It's important for every type of activity, learning activity in a museum, and when technology is involved, it's even more important. Yeah. So please continue to do that.
Yeah, and I would just add too that when we were developing the app, I mean, part of the great thing about having this interactive space in the museum for kids that we were using as the base for this app was that we therefore had a little audience pool to use as evaluators. So we would just go down and say, hey, what do you think of this? And have them try it out. And actually, even some of the less formal things like that were really, really useful.
Okay. So thank you so much. And now let's have last coffee and applause. And then the concluding session. Thank you very much.